So parliamentary inquiry is in. Are subbies getting paid properly and why aren't they if they're not? Well, we found that they're not. So we're going to be talking about what the results are. Level playing field is obviously mentioned multiple times in this parliamentary inquiry. So join myself and Ping from Level Playing Field to have a discussion, talk about what we can do as an industry to make sure that subcontractors get paid. So welcome everyone. Today we're going to be talking about a parliamentary inquiry and what that means for the building industry. What they found was that there's a lot of non-payment happening across Australia and particularly in Victoria. And the difference is the set of laws that we all experience. And as a law firm, we are finding that it's very difficult to really make a difference in terms of being able to be in the back foot in a situation in a contract, where the money is going to, how the builders are holding the money, how we can improve the system to make sure that the money is there if the subcontract is not being paid. So we're going to talk with Ping today and myself, and we're going to quick chat to you guys and explain to you guys what's actually happened with the parliamentary inquiry. So I'll introduce you to Ping. She's been a lawyer and a builder for a long time now. And our submissions into the parliamentary inquiry were pretty extensive. So what did we learn from it? What have we found?
Yeah, I think for a long time we hear the stories on the ground. So people tell us the stories about them not getting paid. People engage our firm to help them get paid. And we use the tools at our disposal. And this inquiry is predominantly about changing the security payments legislation. So we've had this legislation. It came into effect in 2002, and it was amended in 2006. So just once. Whereas if you look around Australia, there's the different security payments legislation. The acts have been amended multiple times, and this is to address the difficulties faced by subcontractors. So I'll give you some examples because that's probably the best way to explain it. I think one of the biggest challenges always that we come across is insolvency. Because if I rank the issues of non-payment, I think the worst scenario is for a subcontractor to put up debt so they can fund the labour and materials to complete a job and then not get paid any of it. You know, there's not getting paid any of it and it's not being paid your margin and some other things. So we'll talk about that afterwards. But the worst scenario is when you put up the debt and you get zero back. So we're really...
Yeah, it's not, I suppose the reality is it's not zero, it's highly negative.
You're in a negative situation where you may be carrying the debt and you need to do other jobs where that profit margin increases in order to cover you on the other job. So you're constantly pushing the losses forward. And that's why you see a lot of subcontractors also experiencing insolvency. It's this knock-on effect. Our whole industry is interconnected. Building itself is a system. If you understand building, every single trade, they affect each other. And that's with all the other projects as well. If you look at Victoria, you've got a certain amount of subcontractors and materials in order to do all these projects. And when one builder or a developer or someone is insolvent, it affects the other projects and it has a much wider consequence than other industries.
And this reminds us of when we started building, and then we would have subcontractors come towards us and say, "Oh, hey, can you pay me a little bit early? I haven't done." And I'm like, "We haven't done the job yet, have you?" And then he's like, "Well, yeah, but the other builder hasn't paid me, or they've gone bankrupt. Now I'm short of money, and now I can't finish your project." So the knock-on effect is even spreading across other builders. So Correct. It's not just affecting subcontractors. And the suppliers, of course, is another huge one. Suppliers are losing big money. And so that risk or that money lost is spread across all the materials, all the business, and the overheads. And the risk factor for them is huge. So the higher the risk the industry, I suppose, it has to have a price point. So that money, the cost of everything is going to go up if the insolvencies go up, right?
Well, I'll give you an example. One of our clients we helped them get a successful adjudication determination. They were awarded over $100,000. And that building company, that director has had 42 companies and been bankrupt twice, yet that builder is still operating, and our client's in a position where they did the work and the work was good. They've been engaged again after the developer got rid of that builder to finish the works, but our client can't get paid. We have to try all these different enforcement methods to try and get paid. And what we're worried about is ultimately the builder will close the company.
And this is going to be, I suppose, I don't want to make it sort of too scary for everyone. We want to see that there's a bit of hope out there. And so in that situation, what is something that clients can do, or how does Level Playing Field, I suppose, assist them? And I mean, we do have a solution for that, right?
So we've actually acted against this builder when he had another entity, and we were able to recover the money by using a recovery from the principal. So security of payments allows you to, if they're still on that job, to try to enforce the debt against the principal above. And in this scenario, because there wasn't a reference date, they already used up the reference date, we had to wait another month before we could go and pursue adjudication. And that delay is all it took. We were begging the developer, please don't pay the funds down to the builder. And they said, we have to. There some sort of legal proceedings in the background that we weren't privy to, but they said, we have to pay the money, so we cannot make direct payment to you. So it's all about cash flow, and it's all about getting the payment quickly downstream. And so we put the case studies and our submissions arguing for statutory trust accounts. And that was one of the recommendations that came back from the committee, was that we do need cascading statutory trust accounts to ensure that people down the chain will receive the money.
And the other thing is also there's a bit of a watch. I mean, we've got a bit of a record of builders that we sort of keep our fingers on the pulse in terms of who's being slow payment, who's got a bad credit history, who's been doing these bad deals, I suppose, in the background. And that's something you can offer to clients as well in the background. Before they sign a contract, it's like, do a background check on who are you working with and what history they have.
And there's definitely commercial ways that you can find out whether someone is solvent or not. Most people in the industry know about Creditor Watch. The credit risk insurers, they also monitor any insolvency risks. So there are ways, but it's about doing that work up front and making sure that you know who you're trading with. I think the greatest advice that we ever give our clients is create some certainty with who you're trading with in the terms of your contract. Because we're not out there gambling. The subcontractors are out there trying to run a business. Do work, complete it, and get paid.
Yeah, and the gambling part is really, it's a way of like the ad says, what are you really gambling with? You know, what are you seeing in terms of the trades? Like, I mean, it seems like it's like a minefield, and that's how we sort of explain to them. You know, you could take a next step and you're going to keep going forward. And some guys are totally fine. Some guys can make it through, and then they might have some successes and sequential successes. But then all of a sudden you step in a landmine. And then what happens in those scenarios? Like, is that going to wipe you out? Do you take it as just a loss? But what is the best strategy that we recommend to clients to make sure that they do get paid? It comes down to the contract, right?
If we could, if you had your wish list of everything that you could have, you would ask your clients to be able to amend the contracts. Get a contract that is at least represents the commercial bargain that you've negotiated. That would be your number one. But if you can't do that, you've already signed the contract, or you don't have the negotiating power, and you need this job. And we understand. We understand overheads, and you need to move that money along. We understand you need to sign X amount of contracts in order for your business to be viable. But if you can't amend the contract, the next thing is your contract administration. So when the one of the biggest sources of non-payment is in relation to variation disputes. So if the variation disputes and the resolution of those disputes are well documented and they occur, there's always this, the construction industry has a tendency to say, I'll give you a direction to vary the works, do the works, everyone puts in their quotations, and then there'll be an agreement. At the end of the job, we'll sort it out. And then you're pushed to the end, and the negotiating power for a subcontractor diminishes over the duration of the project. And we're in this situation because we're residential builders, and we know the crucial points where we really, really need the subcontractors. I mean, how many times have we begged roof plumbers on our jobs to come and finish?
It's a hard breed to fight at the moment. It's a tough job. Obviously, the biggest issues for us has been water ingress, and then it all starts with the roof and box gutters and issues. I mean, we do multi-residential townhouses, and the complexity of the roofs is just phenomenal. Like, you have so many different layers, so many situations, so many corners, so many returns, so many flat roofs. You got roof plumbing issues that.
But I couldn't count the number of times that you came home swearing about this roof plumber who swore that he was going to come back and finish something so that you can finish the cladding, and he doesn't come on time.
I wasn't swearing at them. Obviously, they're a bit limited to the weather, and that's made a huge.
But the project delays.
Yeah, the project delays.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, to get them back, I mean, they're tied to the weather, right? So it's swearing at me in terms of, like, obviously I had to try and scheduling. Once the roof is on, it's a bit easier to work on site because the water's now diverted to the place it's supposed to go. But you can imagine how frustrating it is for them as well. They got to work these long days. They got out in and then when it's not raining, it's probably blistering hot in Victoria, and that just makes it even harder for them to work. So no bad things against them. Obviously, I understand the pressures, but obviously it delays the project. It goes on and on.
And that's the negotiating point.
Yeah.
Because the point to negotiate is when you have the power. If you don't have the commercial power when you're entering the contract, there will be points in the project. And we get it because we're in the same situation. The market will always go up and down. There'll always be fluctuations in supply and demand. And these markets are not all the same. There's the residential construction market. There is a commercial construction industry, for example, apartments and things like that. And then there's the school projects. And then there's the infrastructure projects, the civil works. And they all have their own fluctuations in supply and demand. So we can't say to you, only sign these clauses, because it doesn't make sense. How do you run your business having a hard line on everything? But what we try to encourage people to do is understand your commercial bargaining position and create a risk allocation line. What am I going to accept, and what can't I afford to accept?
And this is the thing with us, right? Because we get to see from, let's say, from small scale residential all the way up to the big job, the big projects happening around, and the money difference is astronomical. I mean, the delay costs. I mean, I can complain about my delay costs, but relative to other builders and other contractors, their delay costs are massive. So the access to the amount of workers just available out there at the moment is very slim pickings. So we're seeing cases where people are just grab a body. Like, I need something, just someone to lift something. I'm happy to pay them great money. So we're seeing a lot of money going into these massive projects that the state is pushing, right? And it's causing a huge issue in the industry, which is it's taken up all the spare capacity that a lot of other guys need as well at the exact same time. And we started seeing this first. It was the material supply, then it was the labour shortages, then the weather, and it was all adding up to making a huge pressure on the builders as well, and developers, and the subcontractors, suppliers. I mean, everyone's been heavily affected by this situation. So,
and that's what the contracts are at. The contracts do not allow for these types of fluctuations. The risk allocation just pushes so much risk onto the builders and then down to the subcontractors that any shock in the system, supply constraints, delays, complex designs, things like that, the contracts do not allow. It just pushes everything down so that the people that need to absorb the risk are the people that can least absorb the risk.
Yeah. And I mean, we're all doing it tough, right? We've all been struggling. We know what it's like, but we also see there is the best situation, and it's double-edged sword, of course, is that there is still plenty of work.
There's opportunity.
Opportunity is there, right? So there's still, if you're in the growth mindset right now and your business is for growth, there is still a huge amount of work out there, and it doesn't seem to be slowing down. I mean, the Reserve Bank is obviously trying to put pressure to slow things down to stop people from borrowing, but at the same time, the government's just importing a whole bunch of people and putting that massive pressure on the system to keep pushing forward. So we're in this weird phenomenon of we could have had a reset in terms of, okay, everyone figure out where they're at and what jobs are going to be the proper jobs. Right now, it's still there's still huge demand. There's still a push to go forward. There's still houses to be required. There's still roads to be built. There's still tunnels. There's still rail. There's all this money still in the system going forward. But at the exact same time, the uncertainty of signing up on a job is massive, right? Mm-hmm. Because is the builder or is the project going to be solvent? And you have to pick your battles, right? And we're telling clients right now, pick your battles, make sure you're profitable, because you have to survive what's happening in the forward. It's still stormy out there. There's still a lot of good fishing to have done. There's still a lot of money to be made. But, what happens to the other guys that are getting knocked out? And we're still seeing insolvency rates. Insolvency is still high regardless.
Yeah. And that's the thing about insolvency. It takes some time for it to catch up. What we're talking about with the losses get pushed on to the next job and the next job. But I'll go back to this. We digress from this parliamentary inquiry. So I'll talk about.
Well, I suppose it leads up to it, and we're not digressing. Yeah. It's sort of we're talking about the problems,
issues, underlying
issues that affect, and this is all the stuff that now the knock-on effects is starting, right? It feels like a bit of a domino effect, right? So you had obviously the bigger we chatted to some, our daughter's friend from school. Her dad lost a significant amount of money, obviously through Porter Davis going under. I mean, back in the day, if you said that these large-scale builders were going to be going under, I'd be like whatever. You saw other larger volume builders on the news, obviously looking like a bit shaky. I've had to raise some money to try and ride the storm. But this is sort of where it leads to, and this is why the parliamentary inquiry now was set up, okay, right? So to see what is going on and how it's making a difference. So we've put in large submissions, right? I mean, you were the front, and we obviously had a lot of stories come out. Like when we put the word out to people, the stories started coming out a lot more than even we knew, and people's experiences. Some of the guys have been around for a long time, and they've survived some massive hits, and to think about where they could have been was very hard to sort of hear. So what actually happened with this inquiry, and what did you think that the biggest outcome was in terms of what the actual problem is in the system?
Aside from the solvency risk, which I think can be addressed with statutory trust accounts, I think that can be quite contentious because I understand that there's a cost involved with setting up cascading statutory trust accounts. So apart from that, it's just the fact that the Victorian legislation is very challenging to use. We practice in other jurisdictions, so New South Wales, we've done adjudications in Queensland, and we know by the file numbers. There are more than double the number of adjudications run in New South Wales. Maybe you're saying that they have more construction work, but then you go and we do adjudication applications in Queensland, and we're just shocked at how much easier it is and cheaper to run an adjudication application. So the legislation itself doesn't have the protection that is required. How the laws work is that the statute sits above the contract. So you can't contract out of some things with the legislation. It's trying to balance the freedom of contracting and the legislation. Whereas in Victoria, it's just left too open so that you have judgments from the Supreme Court, and the interpretations can change the legal rights of subcontractors. I'll give you an example about retention money. It's something that we come across regularly.
That's a huge one. Yeah.
It's a huge one because it's 5% of your subcontract sum, which is generally your profit. And not only do you have to, generally it works like this. They'll take 10% from each progress claim until they get 5% of the subcontract sum. And they'll give you back half of your retention either when you complete, but a lot of the times when the builder completes. So you don't even really know when that is.
And if you're at the start of the project, I mean, that could be a long time away.
If you're a structural trade, if you're a steel fabricator, a concreter, bulk excavation, you're talking about a long time to wait for your money. So you, number one, it can be connected to the builder's performance. So if they get delayed, there was a builder that I won't name, but they were delayed on a few projects, on a number of projects for a few years. And then the subcontractors started an email chain where they were CCing me saying, these projects are delayed because of the builder's defects, so we can't get our retention. What do we do about all this? And this was in 2018 when a High Court judgment came out about retention money, saying tying the retention money of subcontractors to the builders is a pay when paid clause, which is void under the security of payments legislation. And when that judgment got handed down, we all celebrated because there was the opportunity to go and get our retention money. And then fast forward a couple of years and there was a Supreme Court judgment which drastically diminished our capacity to get retention. Whether the interpretation of certain adjudicators was correct or not, it created confusion and it increased the risk. So we had to tell our clients, look, maybe we can get retention money. Maybe it's construction work. When of course it's construction work. If it is 10% of your first few progress claims, how is it not construction work? It is the money, the labour and materials that you put up. Of course it's construction work. And we've had a recent judgment, I think it was only a couple of months ago, which clarified that retention work could be claimed under the security of payments legislation. But an amendment to the Act would make this clear and make it a situation that cannot be misinterpreted in the courts. It would mean that we don't have to run these expensive appeals to try to get the rights that subcontractors in other jurisdictions have just by virtue of the express words in the legislation.
Yeah. So what we're trying to do and what we're trying to push for the government to understand is let's set up the rules. Let's set up the playing field. Let's set up how the process works, because there seems to be a lot of grey area where it sort of goes back and forth, right? And this is where the law, this is what we try and explain, is that it's sometimes up for interpretation, and then who has the final say in terms of interpretation. And it gets challenged all the time, right? It gets, we sort of see it, as you said, in 2018 it was one set of rules, and in 22 years later, 2020, it was another set of rules, right? But the playing field has changed, right? So the COVID set up a whole new situation, which was, hey, you know, what happens to the pricing of materials if we don't get the supply? If the supply chain changes, did I sign that contract? Because we're sort of used to a certain thing, right? We're used to having it just, you go down to the store, you order it, and it comes in, whatever, a day or two, week was like the worst case scenario. But then all of a sudden these things ran out to months.
Yeah, I think COVID really it made everyone question this fixed price lump sum model that pushes all the risk down.
And that really changed the game, right? It really changed the way that the game was played. So we're in a dynamic situation where we're seeing that the rules have changed significantly, and some guys have caught on. Some guys are now updating the way that they process their information and run their company. But the biggest thing we're also seeing is that the way that the builders are now operating at, right? Because they from their perspective as well, it's changed for them as well. The risk factor has changed at the exact same time. But we're seeing some guys still operating in the old handshake method, the old, I know that guy, it's been around for 30 years, we've done it this way, we're totally fine, it keeps going on and on and on and on, right? So, and now they're getting burnt.
You wouldn't be in the construction industry if you hadn't heard the phrase "should be right."
Should be right. Yeah.
Should be right.
Yeah, I've known him for years. We're going to start. We're going to start a board of construction sayings that
and the misconceptions, all these myths that I hear, and I have to try to actively go and dispel.
Yeah.
These construction contracts are drafted with set-off clauses. You can set off from one contract to another.
Yeah.
You know, there's all these little myths, and we will start a board with what everyone, I guess, people's interpretations of how their contracts really operate and how it actually does operate.
And this is the thing. This is the reality of working on a contract. So sometimes it's perceived as the contract is winning the job, right? So the clients are coming up and saying to us, "Oh, I signed the contract and I got the job," right? So, or they say something like on the lines of, "Oh, this is not what I quoted for." So the interpretation of the contract is that I've quoted X on something separate, and we've had a negotiation. We tendered, we did this, and we did that, and then we signed the contract, and we thought that the contract reflected of what we quoted. But when it comes down to the crunch, it's almost like chalk and cheese. It's a complete different set of rules that you signed on for, and maybe have been dragged along thinking that you're in it now. You've sunk your money in, and you've done the project, and you started working on the site. But then something happens on site, and you're like, "Oh, that I didn't allow for that." And then you look at the contract like, yeah, you did."
Yeah, and the thing is, you can't change the fact that construction work is risky. The contracts, the project, the nature of everything is risky. But I think it's about aligning the understanding of the two parties. Like I was in a meeting yesterday, we were drafting amendments to a contract for one of our clients. And the client goes to us, I was talking about this inquiry and saying, we put this submission in, and they've come back with some recommendations, and we're quite excited about it. And then she goes to me, back before we met you, we used to just grab the contract, go to the end, check that the subcontract sum was what was in the quote, we'd sign it, move it along, and start the project. And maybe it's 8 out of 10 or 9 out of 10, or maybe as low as 7 out of 10. It's fine. She'll be right. The contract says that you haven't allowed to check that the holding down bolts are correct, for example.
Yep.
But then in reality, the contract says you do that. You do as many shop drawings, you check the site conditions, you build to achieve the design intent. That's a very common clause in a contract, that you build to the design intent. So if there is a more detailed design, you are deemed to have allowed for that. And people don't understand that these scope of works have become bigger, bigger, and bigger.
Bigger and bigger and bigger, and also the overheads are also creeping up. So maybe the margins aren't as big, and you're sort of rolling over projects between one another. You sort of don't know where you are financially, technically, because you're sort of across multiple jobs, and you're sort of like, I made some there. I made enough there to cover the loss of that one there. And then we're still operating. We're still making money. We're still, moving along. And the business is still hiring. There's still more work out there. And you never really sort of had to get a sense of where you're
at with each project. And project accounting. Like I remember when we were doing a lot more residential projects and trying to do project accounting, trying to explain to your bookkeeper exactly how to project code and get all the costs for a specific project and see how much money you're making on a project can be very challenging to allocate the costs across all the different projects. And so then if your system is not set up and you don't have that clarity, you don't have the information on how much money you're really losing on a certain project until the cash flow stops.
Yep.
And then that's when you're like, oh, okay, it doesn't quite add up. I must be losing some money here.
Yeah. And this parliamentary inquiry also has to bring up some sort of information about what they recommend and how to solve some of these issues, right? So what were some of the findings that you found that were sort of really stand out that needed to be changed? Primarily, we were talking about Victoria's legislation needs an update, significant update. And, what are the things that we're trying to push the government now to keep this momentum going.
Yes.
To start putting some pressure on the government. We'd like to have some help from the industry.
Get everyone talking about it.
Get everyone talking about it. We're starting to see, we're members of a lot of associations that we're there, and we're having a good chat to the board members and everyone else, like how they can now start putting a bit of pressure, because they do have some influence in the industry. Of course, some of these guys have been around for, we were just
at that 80th anniversary.
80th anniversary of CCF, right? So
and there was a gentleman sitting next to us, and he said, "I'm older than this anniversary." So.
Yeah, he was, and he's seen the industry, for a long time. Let's say, I think he just said about 50 years he's been in the industry. Yeah. So, what are some of the changes that we need to sort of see? And one of the amazing things that we asked him, so what do you think people should start doing? And his literal response was, start saying no. Start saying no, right? Like, what are we agreeing to here? Just say no, right? And it's an amazing just to hear it, that he survived all these years because he's said no to certain things. And we've got clients that are just saying yes to everything, and then feeling like they don't have a right to say no to something, right? They feel like there's all this pressure to keep continuing on and doing the job that they're not supposed to be doing, and they're not getting paid for it.
Like, I understand the mentality of you wanting to say yes. We heard this story of one of the civil contractors who I think they've got over 100 employees now. But when they first started and they picked up a job, which was, it's the kind of you take a too big bite and just, chew like crazy. Start chewing like crazy.
We've all been there.
And he took enormous risk on that project. And what it did was it propelled his company into this other level. And it's an amazing story of taking risk and seeing the reward. And I understand you can do that sometimes, but risk is about how many times you can do it until you get burnt. So we understand that need to take certain risk, but once you get to that level, or once you are in that comfortable position where you want to play, then it should be about how do you de-risk? How do you do this? How do you change your company so that you can do this for the next 20 years, the next 60 years, or whatever it is your plan is?
Yeah, and your strategy now has to be really looked at, right? It wasn't just a matter of growth. It's like what strategy, what field are we going into? I mean, they talked about some of the cancellations in the pipeline, right? Starting from federal, and the question is going to be how much is Victoria going to have to start cancelling? And it's going to be it literally came out yesterday that they've signed the suburban rail loop, the first section of it, but. I mean, let's be honest about it here. Like, what's happening with the Victorian debt crisis at the moment? It's out of control. And are they going to get to a point where they're just going to run out of money and then get to a half-built train line? I mean, it sounds not possible, but the reality is that the state has got a massive debt burden. And what's Victoria going to look like in 5, 10, 15 years? If you can increase all the population, how that's going to affect the construction industry, right? So the pipeline looks like it's going to be full, right? So there's still going to be plenty of work. There's still going to be opportunity for companies to step up and take on some bigger projects that they maybe, like you said, bite off more that they can chew, and then they can grow from that. Mm-hmm. But what if they're not going to be looking at their contracts? I mean, we say to them now, we've been trying to educate them for a while now. We thought when we first started this business, we said, how about we do some educational seminars and we try and train your staff up? But what we found was that obviously through training, you can only do so much gets absorbed, right? We can only train so much where the staff have got a million things on their plate and they can pick up little bits and pieces, which is actually really good. And this is why we're going to try and start these conversations.
It's about awareness, about raising awareness about what is the reality.
So the end product is we found that, hey, how about you subcontract that part out now to a professional, right? Because, I mean, if you're going to hire an accountant to do all your accounting, because you don't want to, you can learn the basics of how the accountant wants you to structure your company, right? How you're supposed to report the BASs, how you're supposed to give the information to the accountant, and then the accountant takes that information and then does his magic and then passes it to ATO, right? So we said, why don't we do the exact same thing for law? Because there's going to be so much training that we can't train these guys out. So we've come up with a bit of a solution for that, haven't we?
Yeah, and I think the traditional law firms are not set up for that. They'll do a lot of the front end advice. They'll give you advice. They'll help you prepare tenders. They can do contracts, and then they might help you when disputes arise or on the back end when you're litigating. But there's nothing really to help subcontractors with contractual compliance. And we've been approached by other software companies who said, well, let's collaborate together and work out how subcontractors can comply with their contractual notices. For example, extension of time notices and variation notices, because there are very strict time bars on these notices. If you don't issue an extension of time within the time bar, which might be 5 business days, or a variation notice within 5 business days, you may have no entitlement to these types of things. And I always struggled with these apps that people had created because they were static. So what we did was we built a form which is that is set up for clients, and it integrates with it brings in a few apps together in order to deliver the notice capability. So that the whole purpose is your leading hand or whoever's on site can from their phone plug in some information. I've made it fat finger friendly because of this guy
that's
is
my fault.
not so good with the
The texting and
Yeah.
your keyboard abilities is very different from mine.
So a lot of it's drop-down menus. A lot of it is trying to reduce the number of inputs needed, and it creates this automatic form. And with the automation technology out there, you can have these reminders sent to your leading hand in a text message every week and say, is there a delay? And then if there's no delay, the sequence ends. If there is a delay, it pushes you to the form and it asks you a few questions and it automates off the previous forms in order to find out what is your date for practical completion. So it's all about compliance. You can have the most beautiful extension of time form or variation notice form, but if no one completes it, it has zero utility.
That's right.
So we focus on creating a system which requires, I'd say less, I'm not going to guarantee it because, depends how fast you are, but it's trying to be less than 30 seconds to provide the input, and it'll go to your email and it goes onto our electronic blackboard, and it'll send you an email and you can forward that on to the head contractor. And by doing that, you are complying with the time bar requirements in the project. Yep. Obviously, there may be further negotiations, further things, but we sit there with our adjudication applications and we spend a lot of money on these submissions arguing that we're still entitled to variations, that we're still entitled to an extension of time, even though we didn't issue the notice. So why not create a system that is easy to comply with and that means that you will issue the notices? And that, I guess that's what we're doing with our legal service. It's about coming up with solutions to the problems in the industry and taking into account how the industry really does operate.
Yeah. And then your compliance with the contract is so sometimes a bit too hard to navigate around. So get us to come and look at it. Get us to navigate with it. We'll come in and we'll understand your company. We'll understand how you operate, and then we'll put you on a subscription. And then that way we can look at contracts for you. We can take care of that part for you, so you're not burdened with that. I mean, it's just such a massive time-wasting experience, right? Because we had this in Perth when we went there. The biggest question was, how do you
deal with the back and forth departures?
Back and forth between between us and our lawyer, then the lawyer to their lawyer, then their lawyer to their project manager, and back from the project manager back to their lawyer. And it's like okay, let's actually create a solution here. Let's just
standardize the process. Standardize the process.
Let us understand your business. Let us understand what contracts you're signing. Let us give you advice on how to set it up. Give us an idea of how you guys want to grow and how you guys want to proceed going forward. Where's your biggest risk? Let's put that down. Let's standardize everything. Let's do a checklist on how you what is your scope of works, and it might come up to a different, because the question was I have the same builder. And I'm going to the same builder again and again and again, but we're going through this process again and again and again. I'm like, yeah, because the projects are different. Every single project has a different set of risks, and the scope is going to be different. So let us take care of that for you. Subcontract that part out, so you can focus on doing what you guys do best, right? Whether you're the crane operator, whether you're the concreter, you guys do that part really well. Run your business. You've got a million things to worry about, right? And this is the part where everyone's sort of pushing it to the side and going, yeah, I'll deal with it.
It's in a too hard basket. There's no solutions out there.
There's no solutions out there. So we've created the solution for you guys. Come and subscribe to us. Come and talk to us. And then we can monitor how your business is going. And I mean, we will tell you how the law is changing as well. We will tell you what the risk is currently and what the risk might be in the near future, so that you guys can be prepared and make sure that you guys understand what the best way to navigate this minefield of challenges and booms and busts, I suppose, and make sure we're not getting caught out with insolvency. Because there's going to be a great time for you guys now to grow. There's going to be a great time for companies to take on a lot more bigger projects than they anticipated that they could ever reach. There is still a massive pipeline of work out there. And if you really want us to level the playing field between you and the builder, get us on board. Have a chat to us, and because we're in the industry, right? We understand construction. So if you've been burnt in the past about talking to a lawyer, obviously come and see the difference between talking to us and a normal law firm, because we are primarily construction people that do law, if anything.
'Cause I think that if you don't do the preparatory work, you get in a situation where you have a massive dispute, and then you go to a lawyer and you give them all your documents. They're all not organised, and it costs a lot of money to try to untangle that dispute and work out what went wrong, what can we do. So our solutions are mostly about how do we trade in a way that we prepare ourselves for a legal dispute arising. These builders, head contractors, developers, they all have in-house counsel. They've all got, they should, or mostly they do, have their paperwork set up because they anticipate that this is a big part of their business. As much as the cash flow and the accounting, it's a big part of your business.
Yep. And we want, the best advice from and the results from that parliamentary inquiry is that, companies have to see what the law is in their state and how they operate in that state and what the best chances are of getting paid around. But we're going to keep pushing the government to change some of the laws so that it's obviously a better playing field, a bit more easier to chase money. But the best result, the best thing you can do right now and to protect yourself is actually come see us.
Negotiate your contracts.
Negotiate contracts at the start.
Administer them correctly. Yeah.
And then we'll follow through with the administration behind the background. Yeah, so I think we'll leave it there. We're going to be doing a regular conversation about this in the industry.
Construction issues?
Construction issues, when we hope to set, because we're having the same conversations we seem to have again and again and again and again. So we said, why don't we just record this and then give it out to our clients? So we'll be setting up a channel and then you guys can subscribe to us as well. And we'll be informing you guys as fast as we can. We've set this up to be an information hub for all the guys. And if something pops up, we'll be likely to have a quick conversation about it. So thank you for listening, and we will be back again soon.
This podcast is produced for educational purposes to give you general information and a general understanding of the law. It should not be considered legal advice. Any advice is general in nature and does not take into account your objective, situation, or needs. Because of that, you should seek professional legal advice before acting on any of the content.